Staff Sergeant, my name is actually on the roster if you could just— Your name? Holloway's face contorted with rage. You don't have a name, 3-6. You're a number. A quota. Another black girl the Army forced me to babysit. He stepped closer. Your kind doesn't belong here. Never did. Never will. Then his hand moved. The slap echoed like a gunshot. Diana's head snapped sideways. Blood appeared on her lip. 200 soldiers gasped. No one intervened. No one spoke. A young black woman stood bleeding, completely alone. But Holloway had just made the worst mistake of his 15-year career. 4 colonels were 3 minutes away, and when they asked him one simple question, "What is her name?" his answer would destroy everything. Let me take you back 72 hours before that satisfying slap changed everything. Fort Marshall Army Training Center sits 40 miles outside Atlanta, Georgia. August in the deep south, 98 degrees by sunrise. Humidity so thick you could chew it. The kind of heat that soaks through your uniform before breakfast and doesn't let up until midnight. Red Georgia clay coats everything here. Boots, uniforms, skin, lungs. The dust gets into places you didn't know existed and stays there for weeks after you leave. This is where the United States Army transforms soft civilians into hardened soldiers. 8 weeks of physical torture, mental warfare, psychological reconstruction. The official washout rate hovers around 60%. More than half of everyone who steps off that bus will never make it to graduation. And overseeing this brutal transformation was one drill sergeant with a reputation that preceded him like a thunderstorm. Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway. Nickname, The Hammer. 15 years of service. 3 combat tours. 2 commendations for valor. And not a single formal complaint in his entire career. Not because he was fair, not because he followed regulations, but because every recruit who passed through his training cycle was too terrified to file one. The bus pulled through Fort Marshall's main gate at exactly 0500 hours. Dawn painted the Georgia pines in shades of orange and gold. Birds sang somewhere in the distance, oblivious to the suffering about to unfold below. 47 nervous recruits stepped off that bus. They clutched regulation duffel bags with white knuckles, hearts pounding, palms sweating, eyes darting around the unfamiliar compound like prey animals scanning for predators. Among them was a 22-year-old black woman named Diana Grace Foster. She carried 1 bag. Just one. No extra luggage, no jewelry, no designer sunglasses or expensive watch. Nothing that would indicate wealth, status, or privilege of any kind. While other recruits fidgeted and whispered anxiously to each other, Diana stood perfectly still. Her eyes moved slowly across the compound, taking in the layout, noting the exits, observing the drill sergeants in the distance, calculating, planning, waiting. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out just enough to see the screen. The contact name read Dad with 4-star emojis beside it. 4 stars, the same number of stars on a certain general's collar. Diana silenced the call without answering, slipped the phone back into her pocket. She had made herself a promise before boarding that bus, a promise she intended to keep no matter what happened in the next 8 weeks. She would earn this on her own. No phone calls home asking for favors, no safety nets woven from family connections, no pulling rank or dropping names. If Diana Grace Foster was going to serve her country, she would serve as Private Foster. Just Private Foster. Not as General Foster's daughter. Her father had understood. He hadn't liked it, but he'd understood. "You're stubborn," he'd said the night before she left. "Just like your mother." "I learned from this best," she'd replied. "Both of you." The processing line moved with military efficiency. Corporal Denise Taylor worked the intake desk, checking paperwork, assigning bunks, collecting personal items for secure storage. Taylor was 28 years old, 6 years in the Army. She had seen hundreds of recruits pass through Fort Marshall, learned to read them within seconds of meeting them, the ones who would make it. The ones who wouldn't. The ones who would surprise everyone. When Diana reached the front of the line, Taylor glanced at her file and froze. Her fingers stopped moving. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked at Diana, then back at the file, then at Diana again. Foster, Diana G. Emergency contact, Raymond J. Foster Sr. Relationship, father. Phone, redacted. Pentagon direct line. Taylor knew that name. Every soldier in the United States Army knew that name. General Raymond J. Foster, Vice Chief of Staff, the second most powerful person in the entire military hierarchy, and his daughter was standing in her intake line at Fort Marshall, in Derek Holloway's training cycle. Diana caught the corporal's reaction, the widened eyes, the sharp intake of breath, the way her hands had stopped moving over the keyboard. Diana gave an almost invisible shake of her head, a tiny movement, barely perceptible. But the message was clear. Please, don't say anything. Let me do this myself. Taylor hesitated for a long moment. She thought about all the things she should do. Report this to Captain Bennett. Inform the base commander. Make sure the general's daughter received appropriate... What? Protection? Special treatment? No. That wasn't what Diana wanted. Taylor could see it in her eyes. She nodded once. Processed the paperwork like any other recruit. Assigned Diana to Barrack 7, Bunk 23. The secret would stay between them. For now. The drill yard materialized from the morning mist like a concrete nightmare. Gray buildings, red clay. The distant sound of shouted commands from other training areas. 4 rows of recruits stood at rigid attention, breath visible in the cool dawn air despite the heat that would come later. No one moved, no one spoke, no one dared. And emerging from the fog came Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway, 6'2", 210 pounds of coiled aggression wrapped in army green, a scar sliced across his left eyebrow, a souvenir from his second tour in Iraq, they said. Campaign ribbons from Afghanistan decorated his chest. His eyes swept across the recruits like a searchlight looking for weakness. Holloway walked the line slowly, clipboard in one hand, the other hand clasped behind his back. His boots crunched against the gravel with each deliberate step. Welcome to the worst 8 weeks of your pathetic lives. His voice carried across the silent yard like a pronouncement of doom. I don't see college students standing here. I don't see mommy's special babies. I don't see future heroes or decorated warriors. You know what I see? He paused. Let the question hang in the humid air. I see raw material. Clay waiting to be shaped. Or broken. Another pause. And my job, my sacred duty, is to forge you into something useful to this nation. Or break you trying. He stopped in front of a nervous white kid with shaking hands. Checked his clipboard. Reeves! Yes, Staff Sergeant. Holloway moved on without comment. Stopped at the next recruit. Checked the name. Patterson! Yes, Staff Sergeant. Name after name. Recruit after recruit. Holloway called each one out, acknowledged their existence, confirmed they were human beings with identities worth remembering. Then he reached Diana. He looked at his clipboard, looked at her, looked at the clipboard again. His jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recruit 36. Not her name, just a number. Row 3, position 6. Diana didn't flinch, didn't react. Yes, Staff Sergeant. You got a number. That's all you need. That's all you are. He moved on without another word. Didn't ask her name. Didn't check the roster long enough to read it. Just assigned her a number and continued down the line. Corporal Taylor watched from the sidelines. Her stomach twisted into knots. She had seen Holloway's training methods before. The pattern was always the same. Some recruits got names, others got numbers. The ones who got numbers were always the same type. Always the ones Holloway decided didn't belong. and the ones who got numbers rarely made it to graduation. The first 2 days of training revealed something Staff Sergeant Holloway hadn't anticipated. Recruit 36 was exceptional. Not just good, not just competent. Exceptional in ways that made the other recruits look like they were moving through mud. Obstacle course completion time, 12 seconds faster than anyone else in the entire training cycle. And that wasn't even the impressive part. The impressive part was what she did after crossing the finish line. She turned around, went back, found Tommy Reeves struggling to climb the final wall, a 12-foot wooden barrier that had broken stronger recruits than him. Diana grabbed his arm, braced her feet against the wall, and hauled him over. She didn't have to do that. Nobody asked her to. It wasn't part of the test, but she did it anyway. Rifle qualification, expert rating, the highest possible score. Her groupings were so tight the range instructor made her shoot twice because he thought the target must be defective. Written tactical assessments, perfect scores, every single one. The training officers started passing her tests around, using them as examples of what right looked like. Physical fitness test, 99th percentile. Top 1% of all recruits who had ever passed through Fort Marshall. In 48 hours, Diana Foster had quietly established herself as the most capable recruit the base had seen in years, and Staff Sergeant Holloway still hadn't bothered to learn her name. 48 hours before the slap, Holloway launched his first public attack. Morning formation. Every recruit assembled in the pre-dawn darkness. The Georgia sun wasn't up yet, but the humidity was already suffocating. Holloway conducted his daily inspection, walking the lines, checking uniforms, finding faults where none existed, building his case against whichever recruit had drawn his attention that day. He stopped in front of Diana. Her uniform was flawless. Boots shined to a mirror finish, every crease perfect, every button polished. She was the only recruit in the entire formation without a single visible defect. 3-6. Step forward. Diana stepped out of line. 200 pairs of eyes shifted toward her, some curious, some sympathetic, some grateful it wasn't them. Holloway circled her slowly, like a shark. Your boots are a disgrace. They weren't. Everyone could see they weren't. Every soldier in that formation knew her boots were regulation perfect, but no one dared to speak. Staff Sergeant, I shined them to regulation standard this morning. Did I ask you to speak? Holloway's voice cracked like a whip. Did I give you permission to open your mouth, 3-6? No, Staff Sergeant. Then why is it moving? He leaned closer. So close she could smell the coffee on his breath. So close she could see the broken blood vessels in the whites of his eyes. You think because you scored well on some tests that you're special? That rules don't apply to you? Diana remained silent, perfectly still, perfectly calm. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but nothing showed on her face. The calm infuriated him. I've seen your type before, 3-6. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. The front rows could hear every word. You think you belong here. You think because we have to let you in now, that makes you equal. He paused. Let the implication sink in. It doesn't. This army was built by real soldiers. You're just filling a quota, a number, a checkbox, and that's all you'll ever be. According to Army Regulation 620, that statement, filling a quota, constitutes discriminatory language subject to administrative action. Any soldier who heard it had a duty to report it. None of them would. Drop and give me 50-3-6, since your boots are such a disgrace. Diana dropped to the red Georgia clay without hesitation. The dirt was still damp from the morning dew. It would stain her uniform, create another violation for Holloway to exploit. She did 60 push-ups, not 50, 60, without slowing, without struggling, without making a sound. When she stood back up, her uniform was dirty, but her eyes were clear, unbroken, unafraid. Holloway's jaw tightened. He had expected her to struggle, to cry, to beg, to break. She hadn't even breathed hard. That afternoon, the isolation campaign began. Mess hall, lunch. Diana sat alone with her tray at the end of a long table. The seats around her remained conspicuously empty. Tommy Reeves, the recruit she had helped over the wall, grabbed his food and started walking toward her table. He owed her. The least he could do was eat lunch with her. "Reeves!" Holloway's voice echoed across the entire mess hall. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. "You want to eat with 3-6? The quota case? Fine. You can join her in extra PT tonight. Both of you. 4 hours. Starting at 2200. Tommy froze mid-step. His tray trembled in his hands. Diana caught his eye, gave him a slight nod. "Go. Don't make yourself a target. I can handle this alone." Tommy walked away, found a seat on the opposite side of the room, didn't look back. Diana ate alone. Every meal. Every day. The message was clear. Associate with 3-6, and you'll suffer with her. Within 48 hours, Diana Foster had become a ghost, surrounded by 200 people but completely, utterly alone. 24 hours before the slap, Staff Sergeant Holloway crossed another line. 0400 hours. The barracks were tomb silent. Every recruit collapsed in exhausted sleep after 18 straight hours of grueling physical training, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones and makes your eyelids feel like they're made of concrete. The door exploded inward, slammed against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness like a knife. 3-6! On your feet! Surprise inspection! Diana jolted awake, heart hammering, mind scrambling to catch up with her body. Holloway was already at her bunk. Tearing apart her carefully made bed, sheets ripped off and thrown to the floor. Pillow launched across the room, the footlocker at the end of her bed upended, its contents scattering across the concrete. He held up her phone. A cruel smile spread across his face like an oil slick. "Well, well, well, what do we have here?" His voice dripped with false surprise. "Cell phones are to be secured in lockers during training hours. Recruit. This is a clear violation of regulations." Diana's mind raced even as her voice stayed steady. "Staff Sergeant, training hours don't begin until 0530. According to regulation..." "Are you citing regulations to me?" Holloway stepped closer. The flashlight beam hit her directly in the eyes. Blinding, disorienting. Article 91, insubordination. Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation. His smile widened. "You want to keep talking, 3-6? Or should I just write you up as quota recruit unnamed? That's all you are to me. All you'll ever be." He pocketed her phone. Her phone with all her recordings, all her documentation, all her carefully gathered evidence of his discriminatory behavior. Diana felt her heart sink. Weeks of preparation. Gone. Or so Holloway thought. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that every recording on that phone had been automatically backing up to a secure cloud account. Every photo, every voice memo, every piece of evidence. A safeguard her brother Marcus had insisted on installing before she left for basic training. Marcus was a military lawyer. JAG Corps. He knew exactly what kind of documentation would be needed if things went wrong. "Trust me," he'd said. "Anything on your phone should exist somewhere else too. Just in case." Just in case. As Holloway walked away with her phone clutched in his fist, Diana allowed herself one small smile. So small no one could see it in the darkness. Let him think he's won. 18 hours before the slap, Holloway escalated to full public humiliation. Morning formation. The entire company assembled. 200 soldiers standing at attention beneath a Georgia sun that was already brutal at 600 hours. Captain William Bennett stood at the front, delivering the standard morning brief. Training schedule, weather warnings, administrative announcements. Holloway waited at his side, barely containing his anticipation. When Bennett finished, Holloway stepped forward. His eyes found Diana in the formation like a heat-seeking missile. "Before we dismiss, I need to address a discipline issue." He pointed directly at her. "Recruit 3-6, step forward." Diana walked to the front of the formation. 200 pairs of eyes tracked her every step. The whispers started immediately. She could feel them like insects crawling on her skin. Captain Bennett frowned. He leaned toward Holloway and spoke quietly, but not quietly enough. "Sergeant, what's this recruit's name?" Holloway shrugged. The gesture was dismissive, contemptuous. "Does it matter, sir? She's 3-6. That's all I need to know about her kind." Bennett's frown deepened, but he didn't intervene. The command structure demanded deference to drill sergeants in training matters. That was how the system worked, a decision Captain Bennett would regret for the rest of his career. "This recruit," Holloway announced, his voice carrying across the silent formation, "has been found in violation of regulations regarding personal electronics. She has also demonstrated a pattern of insubordination and an inability to meet basic physical standards." Lies. Every word was a deliberate, calculated lie. Diana's scores were the highest in the training cycle. Her conduct was impeccable. Her violations existed only in Holloway's imagination. But he had the microphone. He had the rank. He had 200 witnesses too afraid to challenge him. "Frankly," Holloway continued, warming to his performance, "I question whether this recruit has the mental fortitude to serve in this nation's army. Some people are just numbers. They come in, they wash out, and nobody remembers they ever existed." He turned to Diana, smiled. "Isn't that right, 3-6? Diana stood perfectly still, blood roaring in her ears, heart slamming against her ribs, every instinct screaming at her to fight back, to reveal herself, to end this. But she had made a promise. So she spoke carefully, clearly, her voice steady as stone despite the storm raging inside her. "Staff Sergeant, you've called me 3-6 for 5 days. You've never asked my name. You've never looked at my file." The formation held its breath. "If you had, you would know that I have followed every regulation, met every standard, not complained once about the additional duties, the sleep deprivation, or the targeted inspections." Holloway's smile flickered. "If you believe I am unfit to serve," Diana continued, "I respectfully request that you document your concerns through proper channels, including Regulation 620, which governs equal treatment regardless of race or gender." She paused. Let the words sink in. "You can start by learning my name." For a moment, absolute silence. Then Holloway's face went crimson. The veins in his temples bulged, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Your name?" His voice cracked with fury. "You think I care about your name? You're a number, 3-6. That's all you'll ever be. A quota, a statistic, a nobody." "I'm not a nobody, Staff Sergeant." "Oh yeah?" He stepped closer, too close, invading her space. "Then who are you? Tell me. Who exactly do you think you are?" The entire formation leaned forward. Something was about to happen. Everyone could feel it. Diana could have ended it there. Could have spoken her father's name. Could have watched Holloway's face collapse as he realized his mistake. But that would defeat everything she was trying to accomplish. "I'm a soldier, Staff Sergeant, same as everyone else here. That should be enough." "A soldier?" Holloway laughed. The sound was ugly, bitter. "You're not a soldier. You're an experiment, a checkbox. And experiments fail, 3-6. They fail all the time." Captain Bennett finally stepped forward. "Sergeant Holloway, I think that's enough." Holloway ignored him completely. his entire focus locked on Diana. 15 years of buried resentment boiling to the surface. You think citing regulations makes you smart? You think that fancy education makes you better than me? I've broken 100 recruits just like you. 100 nobodies with no names worth remembering. He was inches from her face now, close enough that she could see the rage trembling in his jaw, close enough to smell the hatred on his breath. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Diana realized what was about to happen. He's going to hit me. The thought came with strange clarity. No panic, no fear, just cold recognition. Let him reveal himself. Let everyone see who he really is. "Staff Sergeant," she said quietly, "you're being recorded by the security cameras, and you still don't know who I am." "I don't need to know who you are." His voice cracked. "Names are for soldiers. You're not a soldier. You're nothing." His hand moved. The slap connected with full force, open palm against her left cheek. The sound echoed across the drill yard like a thunderclap. Diana's head snapped to the side. A thin line of blood appeared on her lip. 47 recruits gasped as one. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Holloway's face shifted, rage bleeding into realization, the first flicker of understanding crossing his features. What did I just do? But Diana didn't fall, didn't cry out, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She straightened slowly, wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand, looked at the red smear on her skin. Then she stood at attention, silent, waiting, composed. "Nothing to say now, 3-6? Holloway's voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in. "No regulations to cite?" "I have plenty to say, Staff Sergeant." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "But not to you. Not anymore." She turned her head, found Corporal Taylor in the crowd. "Corporal Taylor, you know what to do." Taylor was already moving, already reaching for her phone. "What?" Holloway sputtered. "Where is she going? What is happening?" 3-6. What the hell? Diana turned back to face him and smiled. A small smile, cold, knowing. The smile of someone holding cards he couldn't see. "You're about to learn my name, Staff Sergeant, and you're going to wish you'd asked 5 days ago." May. 45 minutes earlier, Corporal Taylor had made a phone call. She had stepped behind a supply building, hands shaking, heart pounding, knowing that what she was about to do could end her career. She dialed a number from Diana's confidential file, a number she was never supposed to access. "Sir, this is Corporal Denise Taylor, Fort Marshall Training Center. I'm calling about your daughter." 400 miles away, General Raymond Foster had been in a Pentagon meeting with the Secretary of Defense. He never took calls during briefings. But this call came through on a special line. A line reserved for exactly 2 categories of communication: national security emergencies and family. "He doesn't know her name?" The general's voice went dangerously quiet. "No, sir. He's never asked. He calls her 3-6. He calls her Quota. And, sir, I think something bad is about to happen." A long pause. Then, "I'm dispatching 4 colonels. Inspector General, Post Commander. Legal. Equal opportunity. They'll be there within the hour." "Sir, what should I—" "Let it play out. If this man is who you say he is, he'll reveal himself. And when my colonels arrive, they'll ask him one question." Another pause. "Do you know the name of the recruit you've been targeting?" And when he can't answer, they'll tell him. General Foster's voice hardened, and I want to see his face when he learns whose daughter he's been breaking. 3 minutes after the slap, 4 black SUVs tore through Fort Marshall's front gate. They didn't stop at the security checkpoint. They didn't slow for speed bumps. And when they skidded to a halt outside the drill yard, Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway felt the first real fear of his entire 15-year career. 4 colonels stepped out of the vehicles in perfect synchronization. Their uniforms were immaculate, pressed to razor-sharp creases, shoes polished to mirror finishes, ribbons and decorations arranged with mathematical precision. Their faces were carved from stone. Colonel Patricia Vance, Inspector General's office, the woman who investigated corruption, abuse, and misconduct at the highest levels. Colonel James Beaumont III, Fort Marshal, Post Commander, the man who controlled every square inch of this base. Colonel Helen Richardson, Staff Judge Advocate, Military Prosecutor, the one who decided who went to prison. Colonel David Morrison, Equal Opportunity Division, the officer responsible for ensuring fair treatment regardless of race, gender, or background. Inspector General, Post Commander, Legal, Equal Opportunity. In military terms, this wasn't a response team. This was a firing squad, the institutional kind. 4 full-bird colonels don't show up at a basic training facility at 0647 hours for a routine inspection. They don't arrive in a convoy of black SUVs with sirens and flashing lights. They show up when someone very powerful wants answers. And Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway, standing in the middle of the drill yard with blood on his hand from a recruit he'd just assaulted, had no idea who had sent them. His face went pale. Gray, actually. The color of old concrete. Colonel Vance walked directly toward Diana. She moved past Holloway without so much as glancing in his direction, as if he didn't exist, as if he was beneath notice. Private. Her voice was clipped, professional, but underneath, something that might have been concern. Are you injured? Minor laceration to my lip, ma'am. Diana's voice was steady, controlled. I'm functional. Vance examined the wound. Blood still fresh, already swelling. The impact site would bruise badly within the hour. She had seen wounds like this before, usually in domestic violence cases. Corman. She snapped her fingers without looking away from Diana. Now. Medical personnel materialized as if from thin air. They began treating Diana's lip with practiced efficiency. Only then did Colonel Vance turn to address Staff Sergeant Holloway. Her gaze could have frozen the Georgia sun. Staff Sergeant Holloway, her voice carried across the silent drill yard, 200 soldiers hanging on every word. I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Holloway's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Hard. Yes, ma'am. The recruit you just struck. Vance let the words hang in the air like a noose. What is her name? Silence. Absolute. Complete. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. 200 soldiers watched. 4 colonels waited. Diana, being treated by the corpsman, showed no expression whatsoever. Holloway's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She's Recruit 3-6, ma'am. 3rd row, 6th position. That's how Her name, Sergeant. Vance's voice cracked like a whip. Not her position number, not her row designation. Her name, the name her parents gave her, the name on her birth certificate, her name. Holloway's face twisted through a series of expressions, confusion, fear, dawning horror. I don't... Colonel Morrison stepped forward. His voice was ice and steel. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly, Sergeant. You've been training this recruit for 5 days? Yes, sir. 5 days. You've assigned her extra duties, conducted multiple inspections of her bunk, singled her out repeatedly in front of the entire formation, called her quota case and nobody in front of 200 witnesses. Morrison paused. Let each accusation land. 3 minutes ago, you struck her across the face hard enough to draw blood. Another pause. And you don't know her name? Holloway's uniform was soaked with sweat, dark patches spreading under his arms, down his back. His hands trembled visibly at his sides. Ma'am, sir, I call all the underperforming recruits by their numbers. It's a training technique, a motivational strategy. I've been doing it for 15... Do you? Vance cut him off mid-sentence. Because we've reviewed the security footage from the past 5 days. You called Recruit Reeves by name, Recruit Patterson by name, Recruit Delgado, Recruit Morrison, Recruit Carter. She stepped closer. All white recruits, all addressed by their proper names. Holloway's face went from gray to white. But this recruit, Vance gestured toward Diana without looking, you only ever called 3-6, or quota, or nobody. The silence that followed was devastating. So I'm going to ask you one more time, Staff Sergeant. Vance's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow every person in that formation heard every word. And understand that your answer will be part of the official record, that it will be included in your court-martial proceedings, that it will follow you for the rest of your life. She paused. The recruit you just assaulted. What is her name? Derek Holloway's voice cracked like thin ice over deep water. I don't know. Colonel Morrison pulled a folder from under his arm, opened it slowly, drew out a single sheet of paper. Then let me educate you, Staff Sergeant. He began to read. Slowly, clearly, loudly enough for every one of the 200 soldiers to hear. Recruit 3-6, real name, Private Diana Grace Foster. Holloway blinked. The name didn't register. Foster. Common enough name. Could be anyone. Graduated magna cum laude from Howard University. Bachelor of Science in Political Science. Entered basic training 8 weeks ago with the highest entrance scores in her entire recruitment class. Still nothing. Holloway looked confused. What did any of this matter? Emergency contact listed as Raymond J. Foster, Sr. A flicker. Something stirring behind Holloway's eyes. Recognition trying to break through denial. Relationship to recruit, father. His face went pale. Current rank, general, 4 stars. His knees buckled. Current position, Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Army. The world stopped. Time froze. Everything Derek Holloway had ever believed about himself, his career, his future, his life, it all collapsed in that single moment. The color drained from his face. Not gradually, all at once. Like someone had pulled a plug at the bottom of a bathtub. His mouth opened, worked silently. No sound came out. His body swayed. His legs refused to support him. He caught himself on nothing. Nearly fell. In the United States Army, there are approximately 1.1 million active duty personnel. Soldiers, officers, support staff. 1.1 million people serving their country. Exactly 9 of those people hold 4-star general rank at any given time. 9 out of 1.1 million. General Raymond J. Foster is one of them. He reports directly to the Chief of Staff of the United States Army. He advises the Secretary of Defense on matters of national security. His decisions affect military operations on 6 continents. He has sat in the Situation Room with 3 different presidents, and Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway, who couldn't be bothered to read a roster, who couldn't be bothered to learn a recruit's name, who had spent 5 days systematically dehumanizing a young black woman because he thought she was powerless, had just drawn blood from his only daughter. General Foster's... Holloway's voice came out as a croak. She's General Foster's daughter. Colonel Vance's voice held no mercy, no pity, no room for excuses. Yes, the woman you called quota case, the woman you called nobody, the woman you said had no name, no connections, no power. She stepped closer. Her shadow fell across him like judgment. That woman. Holloway spun toward Diana, desperation twisting his features into something almost unrecognizable. You never... Why didn't you tell me? Diana's voice was calm, level, unbroken. "You never asked, Staff Sergeant." The words hit him like physical blows. 5 days. You had 5 days to look at a roster, to read a file, to ask me my name like a human being. She met his eyes directly. No anger, no triumph, just truth. But you didn't want to know my name. You wanted me to be nobody, because nobodies are easy to break. If I had known, that is exactly the problem, Sergeant. Colonel Vance cut him off. If you had known she was General Foster's daughter, would you have treated her differently? Yes, I mean, so your treatment of recruits depends on who their fathers are, on whether they have connections or power, on whether they're somebody or nobody. Holloway had no answer, because any answer would destroy him. Any answer would condemn him with his own words. Diana stepped forward, addressed the entire formation. "I want everyone to hear this." 200 soldiers leaned forward. "I'm not filing this report because my father is a general. I'm filing it because Staff Sergeant Holloway spent 5 days treating me like I wasn't human, and he only did it because he thought I was powerless." Her voice strengthened. "He thought no one would believe me. He thought no one would care. He thought I was nobody." She paused, scanned the faces of the recruits she had trained beside. "But here's what everyone needs to understand. I'm not special. I'm just the first one whose nobody turned out to be somebody. How many others came before me? How many recruits did Holloway break because they really were alone? Because their fathers weren't generals? Because no colonels were coming to save them?" The weight of the question pressed down on every soldier present. "My name is Diana Foster, and I'm not here to be saved by my father's rank. I'm here to make sure that the next recruit, the one who really is nobody special, gets treated like a human being anyway." She straightened to her full height. "Because that's what this uniform is supposed to mean." Silence. Then Tommy Reeves started clapping. He was alone at first, just one pair of hands. The sound echoed across the silent drill yard like a heartbeat. Then another soldier joined, then another, then 10, then 50. Within seconds, 200 soldiers were applauding. Not for Diana's family connections, not because her father was a general, for the truth she had spoken. Colonel Beaumont called the formation to attention. The applause stopped instantly. "Staff Sergeant Derek J. Holloway is hereby relieved of duty effective immediately pending court-martial. Charges include cruelty and maltreatment under Article 93, assault under Article 128, and conduct unbecoming under Article 134 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice." 2 MPs stepped forward, positioned themselves on either side of Holloway. Additionally, the Equal Opportunity Division will investigate documented patterns of discriminatory conduct over the past 18 months. Holloway made one last desperate attempt. He turned to Diana, voice breaking like shattered glass. "Private Foster, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. If I had known your name..." Diana met his eyes. No anger, no satisfaction, just truth. "My name was on your roster every single day, Staff Sergeant. It was right there. You just didn't think I was worth reading. I made a mistake." "No." Diana shook her head slowly. "You made a choice. For 5 days, you chose not to see me as a person. The mistake was thinking no one would ever find out." She paused. Let the words sink in. "You didn't lose your career because you hit a general's daughter, Staff Sergeant." She looked back over her shoulder as the MPs prepared to lead him away. "You lost it because you finally hit someone who could make you remember her name." The MPs escorted Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway off the drill yard at 07:12 hours. He would never return. 4 hours later, a Black Hawk helicopter descended onto Fort Marshall's tarmac. General Raymond J. Foster, Sr. stepped out before the rotors stopped spinning. 4 stars gleaming on his collar, Pentagon crisp uniform, face carved from granite. He had been in a meeting with the Secretary of Defense when Corporal Taylor's call came through, had excused himself immediately, made 3 phone calls, requisitioned a helicopter, 400 miles in 90 minutes. Diana stood outside the base commander's building, butterfly bandage on her lip. Uniform dusty, but crisp. Posture perfect. When she saw her father approaching, something cracked. Just for a moment. Not tears. Just relief. Diana. Dad. He pulled her into his arms. Not a general hugging a soldier, a father hugging his daughter. He never learned your name? Not once. 5 days. I was just a number to him. You could have ended this any time. You could have told him. And then what? Diana pulled back, met his eyes. He would have treated me like a princess. And the next black girl who came through, the one without a 4-star father, would have gotten everything he was saving for me. General Foster studied his daughter for a long moment. When did you get so wise? Learned from the best. A pause. This has to change something, Dad. Not just punish one drill sergeant. Change the system. I know. He nodded slowly. That's why I'm here. Within 72 hours, General Foster initiated a formal review of harassment protocols across all Army training facilities. A task force was formed. New procedures were drafted, and one specific mandate became known as the Foster Protocol. 6 weeks later, Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway stood before a military tribunal. The court-martial had lasted 4 days. 47 witnesses testified under oath. Security camera footage was analyzed frame by frame. Training logs were scrutinized. Pattern after pattern of discriminatory behavior was documented, cataloged, and displayed. The verdict was unanimous. Staff Sergeant Derek J. Holloway, this tribunal finds you guilty on all charges. Holloway stood in his dress uniform. The drill sergeant badge had been stripped from his chest. His face was gaunt, gray, aged 10 years in 6 weeks. Article 93, Cruelty and Maltreatment, guilty. Article 128, Assault, guilty. Article 134, Conduct Unbecoming, guilty. The military judge continued reading the sentence. Aggravating factors, including racial discrimination and deliberate dehumanization of subordinates, have been established through documented evidence. Your sentence? Reduction in rank to Private E1. Forfeiture of all pay and allowances for 12 months. Confinement for 180 days. And dishonorable discharge upon completion of sentence. 15 years of service. 3 combat tours. 2 commendations for valor. All erased. Not because Derek Holloway hit a general's daughter, but because he finally hit someone who could force the system to see what he had been doing all along. To everyone. The investigation that followed his arrest uncovered 18 months of systematic abuse. 23 complaints had been filed against Holloway over 5 years. Every single one dismissed, buried, lost in paperwork. 14 recruits who washed out during his training cycles showed documented patterns consistent with targeted harassment. 8 of those 14 were black or Latino. 6 were white. In Holloway's official training notes, the 8 minority recruits were referred to exclusively by position numbers. Their names never appeared. Not once. The 6 white recruits who failed? All documented by name. All given detailed narrative explanations for their struggles. It wasn't coincidence. It was systematic erasure. As the MPs prepared to escort him from the courtroom, Holloway passed Diana. She sat in the gallery wearing her new uniform. Officer candidate school insignia on her shoulder. Foster on her nameplate. Their eyes met. Foster. His voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. Diana studied him for a long moment, searching for sincerity, finding something. Maybe genuine regret. Maybe just the fear of consequences finally catching up. That's the first time you've said my name without being forced to. Holloway's eyes dropped to the floor. I hope you mean it, Staff Sergeant. Because sorry is the beginning, not the end. The MPs led him away. Diana watched him go. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a quiet hope that somewhere in the 180 days ahead, Derek Holloway might finally learn to see people instead of numbers. Outside the courtroom, Tommy Reeves was waiting. He stood taller now than he had 6 weeks ago, looked people in the eye. Something had fundamentally changed in him since that morning on the drill yard. Candidate Foster. He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to say something about that day in the mess hall when I didn't sit with you. I remember. I was scared. That's not an excuse, I know it's not. But I was scared, and I let you eat alone. And I'm sorry. Diana considered him for a moment. I know you testified at the hearing. Everything I saw. Everything I should have reported from the beginning. Does that help? His voice cracked slightly. Does that make up for not being there when it mattered? Diana extended her hand. It doesn't change what happened, but it might change what happens next. For the people who come after us. They shook hands. That's all any of us can do, Reeves. Be better than we were yesterday. Tommy Reeves would graduate basic training with honors. 3 years later, he would become a drill sergeant himself. His approach would be radically different from his predecessors. In his office, he would keep a framed quote, words he heard from a fellow recruit on the worst day of training. A lion doesn't lose sleep over the opinion of sheep, but it's the lion's job to make sure no sheep becomes a wolf. Corporal Denise Taylor stood at attention in General Foster's temporary office. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. She was absolutely certain she was about to be court-martialed for accessing confidential personnel files. At ease, Corporal. Sit. She sat, just barely. You made a phone call 6 weeks ago. General Foster's voice was unreadable. Using information you weren't authorized to access. You violated multiple regulations. You could be charged under Article 92. Taylor's heart sank through the floor. Do you know what I have to say about that? No, sir. General Foster slid a document across the desk, a commendation letter, with his signature at the bottom. I say you demonstrated exactly the kind of moral courage this army needs more of. You saw something wrong. You had no obligation to act. You risked your entire career to protect a fellow soldier. He stood, extended his hand. Effective next month, you're transferring to the Inspector General's office. We need people who will make the hard calls. You've already proven you're one of them. Taylor's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly. Thank you, sir. No, Corporal. Thank you for making that call. Corporal Denise Taylor would serve 12 more years. She would rise to Master Sergeant. She would personally identify and investigate 37 cases of command abuse, cases that might never have surfaced without someone willing to pick up a phone and say, "This isn't right." 1 year later, Diana Grace Foster stood on the parade ground at Fort Benning, officer candidate school graduation, gold bars gleaming in the Georgia sun. Her mother pinned one bar, her father pinned the other. Lieutenant Foster. General Foster's voice was quiet, proud. I like the sound of that. It has a nice ring to it. When reporters asked what she planned to do with her commission, Diana's answer was simple. I'm going to make sure no one has to be a general's daughter to be treated with dignity. That's the whole point of this uniform. Everyone wearing it is supposed to be equal. My job is to make that promise actually mean something. Since the Foster Protocol was implemented, harassment complaints at Army training facilities have increased by 43%. Not because harassment increased, because soldiers finally felt safe reporting it. 71% of those complaints have resulted in disciplinary action. Accountability has become the expectation, not the exception. This story gets shared every time someone feels invisible. Every time someone is treated like a number instead of a name. Every time a person in authority forgets that the people beneath them are human beings, with families, with histories, with dignity that shouldn't require a powerful last name to protect. Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway thought he was teaching Diana Foster a lesson about power. He was, just not the lesson he intended. He taught her that power abused will always, eventually, face power applied. He taught her that refusing to see someone, deliberately choosing not to learn their name, is its own form of violence. Violence that often comes before the physical kind. He taught her that the military she loved could be better, and that she could be the one to make it so. But most of all, he taught 1.1 million active-duty soldiers a truth that General Foster put into one sentence at his daughter's graduation. The measure of a leader isn't just how they treat people who can help them. It's whether they bother to learn the names of people they think can't. Diana Foster didn't hide her identity to trap Derek Holloway. She gave him every opportunity to discover it. Her name was on every roster. Her file was in his office. Her emergency contact was one click away. He simply never cared enough to look. And in that deliberate blindness, that willful refusal to see, he revealed exactly who he was. A man who sorted human beings into somebodies and nobodies. A man who believed power meant never having to acknowledge the powerless. A man who learned, far too late, that the nobody he'd been trying to break was somebody all along. The question isn't whether Holloway would have treated Diana differently if he'd known who her father was. The question is, why should that matter? Why should any soldier, any person, need a powerful last name to be treated with basic human dignity? That's the question Diana Foster forced an entire institution to answer. And the answer changed everything. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been made to feel like a number instead of a name? Have you ever watched someone be treated as invisible, worthless, beneath notice, and stayed silent because you were afraid? Have you ever wondered if your voice could actually change anything? It can. Diana Foster was one voice. She refused to be a number. Corporal Taylor was one voice. She made a phone call. Tommy Reeves was one voice. He testified when it mattered. 3 voices. 3 choices. A systemic change that has now protected thousands. If this story made you feel something, share it. Not for views, not for likes, not for algorithms. Share it because somewhere right now, there's someone being called a number who needs to hear that their name matters, that they matter. And if you've been silent when you should have spoken up, this is your permission to speak. Because the next Diana Foster might be waiting for someone like you to say their name. Staff Sergeant Holloway stood in that courtroom and heard his sentence read aloud. Guilty on all charges. Career destroyed. Legacy erased. But the real punishment wasn't the confinement, wasn't the demotion, wasn't even the dishonorable discharge. The real punishment was the question that will follow him for the rest of his life. What is her name? I don't know. 3 words. That's all it took to end 15 years of service. 3 words that proved he had never seen Diana Foster as a human being worth knowing. Captain Diana Foster serves today in the United States Army. She leads a company of soldiers. She knows every single one of their names, and they know hers. Because that's what leadership looks like. Not power over people, power with them, power that sees, power that knows, power that names. So before you scroll away, I want you to do one thing. Think about the people in your life, the ones you see every day but don't really see, the ones who serve your coffee, clean your office, deliver your packages, answer your calls. Do Do you know their names? If you don't, learn them. Today. Because every person you meet is somebody's Diana Foster, somebody's child, somebody's everything, and they deserve to be more than a number. Leave a comment below. Tell me about a time someone made you feel invisible, or tell me about the person who finally saw you when no one else would. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves to be called by their name. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. And subscribe, because every week we tell true stories of justice, redemption, and the power of standing up for what's right. Remember, a lion doesn't lose sleep over the opinion of sheep, but it's every lion's job to make sure no sheep becomes a wolf. Sometimes justice isn't about being powerful. It's about being seen, being named, being human. This story is dedicated to everyone who has ever been reduced to a number, and to those who called them by their names anyway.